Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Mobility Club's webinar speaker series. Global Mobility Club's vision and mission is to bring awareness and empower our students to pursue global mobility. In this semester, we are conducting case competition in the depths of global mobility management, webinar speaker series that we inaugurated just now, and then a career fair in the coming week. Our first speaker for the series is Ellie Sullivan, the Senior Vice President of Weichert Workforce Mobility, which provides cooperation, relocation, and workforce mobility services, making it incredibly easy to deploy the key talent across the world. And Ellie, with 35 plus years of experience, is widely regarded as an expert in workforce mobility on relocation trends and global practices. And today she will share her insights and experience on the emerging trends in the move towards digital and areas of application of technology in the mobility industry. Thank you so much for attending, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be back with the GMC. I had the privilege of participating in one of your speaker series a couple of years ago. And when I didn't get invited back, I thought maybe it wasn't that I was thrilling enough as a presenter. So I was really excited to get an invite again. And am just really honored with the idea of being able to maybe stimulate some ideas around the kind of career choices that you have in front of you, and also excited for the opportunity to lay the foundation for your case competitions, because I think a lot of the topics that we might talk about today will serve as great topics for your case competition. And lastly, I would certainly invite you all to connect with me on LinkedIn, so that if you have any questions regarding any of the topics that we talked about today, I'd be happy to work with your team competitions. As Lateetha indicated, I've got nearly, well, she said nearly 35 years of experience, or 35 plus. It's actually closer to 4 decades, which is quite a long period of time. And when I started right out of school, similar to you, I never would have imagined that I would still be in the global mobility industry, let alone with the same organization 40 years later. But indeed, that is what happened. And I like to think that it happened because the work is so stimulating, and because I had so much of a great opportunity to make a difference in the lives of other people, because global mobility really does impact other people's lives. So I hope today I can share with you my unique point of view and share with you a lot of the topics that I'm seeing as really trends today. And it's not lost on me that I'm probably the oldest one on the webinar talking about the future of mobility. But that long history has really provided me with a great vantage point to see what the future holds. And I hope I can share some of those observations with you. Not the least of which is ChatGPT. And I'm wondering what you all think about artificial intelligence and how it's going to impact global mobility in the future. Despite how exciting the opportunities are with AI, I still think that global mobility has the unique career options of really engaging empathy and giving the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives, something that I don't think AI will really be well equipped at doing in the future. And I've got a lot more on AI and on technology. In fact, the team that set up this speaker series talked about, wanted to address both mobility trends as well as technology. And my advice back to them was, you can't talk about mobility trends without talking about technology, because it's having such a dramatic impact on everything in global mobility. So I'm going to share my screen. I've prepared a couple of slides for you, and I'll pull those up now. Maybe you can let me know if you can see those. And let's see if I can get them full screen. All right. So we're going to try and help you make work happen. That happens to be our motto as an organization, and again, something that I've had the real privilege to impact for hundreds of organizations. And I've got a lot of use cases and case studies to share with you today. But true to the topic of today's meeting, I thought we'd frame out some of the bigger picture trends. So there's a lot of verbiage here on this slide, but the first point that programs today are far more complex. You certainly are aware as students of global mobility that the traditional one-way transfer has emerged post-pandemic into a wide variety of different program types. Today's global mobility professionals are managing all kinds of remote work, hybrid, business travel, and one of the more maybe creative and growth-oriented mobility types is employee requested moves. Certainly the pandemic has had a tsunami of change to our industry and has driven all these different types of mobility, but it's also created a lot more complexity for global mobility professionals. Today's companies are managing on average 6.3 policies, and I think it'll be interesting to see in the future how we monitor that with the evolution of cafeteria and more flexible programs, because ultimately that provides a much wider combination of mobility programs, if you will. The sad thing is, however, the vast majority of companies are not currently leveraging all of the technology that's available to them. And the vast majority see a great opportunity for improvements in leveraging technology. As you see, 75% indicated using new or enhanced technology is the key to managing global mobility more effectively. So those of you that are studying or have a dual major, maybe technology and global mobility, you have a very promising future. Another big picture trend is really stems from a lot of the voice of the customer work that we do. So I have the privilege of working directly with client organizations all over the world and do on a routine basis interviews with senior leaders of those organizations, the stakeholders. And the biggest unmet need from their point of view is greater connectivity with technology. So it should come as no surprise that organizations like Workday and ADP are organizing global payroll and HRIS systems on a worldwide basis. But very few technologies from relocation management companies integrate successfully or easily with those HRIS systems. So it creates a barrier for those businesses. They don't want to be experts in global mobility. They want to run the business and manage talent. So the unmet need is the opportunity to really connect existing HRIS systems with global mobility programs to make it more effective and easier to manage. The other thing that businesses want is cost predictability. As a result of inflation and rising interest rates and the post-pandemic costs have risen dramatically. And so businesses are looking for greater predictability when it comes to cost. And more integration of HRIS systems will allow them to initiate transfers faster and easier. How's the pace? Everything good? Anybody have any questions so far? I guess we're going to use the chat panel for questions. Is that correct? Yep. Okay, good enough. I hope I'm not using terminology that you haven't already been exposed to. And if so, just raise a hand there so I can take a breather and explain that element. As I mentioned, inflation and recession fears, rising interest rates are all having a dramatic impact on not just program costs for organizations, but on housing. And that has created a great deal of reluctance to relocate for employees. There's also, you may be aware of some pending or legislation that's been implemented in Canada, the prohibition on foreign buyers. This nationalism is really driven by a false, perhaps, premise that foreign buyers are generating record increases in housing costs. So Canada passed legislation just this past year that prevents foreign buyers from buying homes or real estate in Canada. So it's just one example of how nationalism has decreased the supply of housing and makes it more challenging to get people to accept a relocation. There's also a shortage of housing as a result of post-pandemic activity that has really reignited. And of course, during the pandemic, there was a considerable constraint in the supply chain, and that caused a stalling for new home construction. The bottom line is that there's intense demand for housing on a global basis, as well as very limited supply. And that, again, is fueling very unpredictable costs, as well as reluctance to relocate. Now, I took 3 snapshots from the US, Germany, and Singapore, courtesy of the destination service providers that we work with around the world. And you can see that they, despite little pockets of opportunities and some pockets, for instance, in the United States, where there is some softening of home prices. Just yesterday, I read an article that indicated that in Tampa, Florida, the prices have increased 59% in 3 years, creating very unaffordable housing in most regions and very tight supply. The same thing exists in Germany and Singapore to some degree, and it has created a knock-on impact for organizations that is increasing their costs. These abbreviations stand for temporary housing stays. So what we're seeing on the ground are that transferees that accept a move are asking for longer temporary housing. They're finding it more difficult to find suitable housing and more likely to have to take a compromise. And across the board, the recommendations from our destination service providers are to hasten the decision-making. No longer do transferees have the opportunity to go on a home finding trip and take a leisurely orientation to the new location and explore a wide variety of options, because there just simply aren't a lot of options. And that creates a lot more stress for employees that are relocating, and again contributes to the unpredictability of costs for businesses today. Now, I serve on the board of directors for the Canadian Employee Relocation Council, and after examining the housing shortage, we elected to conduct some research on the availability of housing and what kind of solutions organizations were implementing as a result of a lack of affordable and available housing. And as you can see from the results, 81% are now providing longer temporary housing benefits, again, causing costs to increase. 62% were allowing employees to source alternative temporary housing options like Airbnb, which historically might not have been widely embraced by client organizations, primarily because of a lack of consistent quality and duty of care. The third statistic that we revealed was that 38% of them were providing corporate accommodations. So again, you can see where the function of global mobility has really expanded. Now they're securing corporate accommodations. So that might entail something like soliciting and securing long-term leases in their major hubs and allowing employees to cycle in and out of those properties so that they are assured of having available temporary housing. The other solution that clients are implementing as a result of the housing availability and affordability crisis is offering, you guessed it, remote work and commuter assignments. So if an employee is reluctant to relocate because of the housing shortage, they may be eligible for either a commuter arrangement or remote work with some kind of commuting option. So housing is not the only element that is driving reluctance to relocate. A preference for remote work and partner employment opportunities in destination locations. I wanted to share this particular research finding because I love this organization, the Partner Permits Foundation. They are a foundation that supports legislation around the world that allows that promotes the employment of spouses and partners for employees that are relocating on various visa packages. And it is certainly one of the more predominant obstacles to pursuing a relocation. And the work that they're doing is very, very interesting and worthwhile. So the vast majority want the opportunity for partners to be employed. So you've got a combination of a preference for remote work, the ability to afford and find housing. You've got spouse employment or partner employment opportunities, immigration delays. You've got the nationalism that is prominent in countries like Canada that are preventing us from allowing employees to buy. All of these elements are creating some pretty sizable reluctance to relocate. And I think from a case competition, that might be a really fascinating topic to uncover what employees are motivated to accept a relocation and why they're motivated to accept a relocation. So our research indicates that employees are really excited about opportunities to upskill, to learn more in the destination location and use relocation opportunities to learn a new skill, to pursue more meaningful work. They certainly want health and well-being and growth opportunities, career growth opportunities. The good news is relocating and global assignments offer a rich opportunity for all of these pursuits. And 93% of employees feel that international assignments can be a life-changing opportunity. But the reality is they want that experience to be an exceptional one. Employees want to stay with their employer only if they're offering a great employee experience. So, looking at how that impacts a business, they're looking at why they should emphasize the employee experience. And research out of McLean Company, their HR trends reports, proved that those companies that are really focused on an exceptional employee experience have 2.4 times performance in DE&I. They're 2 times more likely to be nimble and agile, able to take advantage of business opportunities. They're more innovative by 1.9% and productive by 1.8 times. And overall performance for those organizations that are focused on the employee experience are 1.4 times likely to have better overall performance. So how does the employee experience kind of get reflected in global mobility? Because a great employee experience is a very broad category, and it certainly reflects everything from your manager to your other HRIS systems. How the employee experience is impacted by mobility is just the focus or the lens that we're looking at employee experience from. So thinking a little bit about one of the biggest trends in our industry is curating the employee experience to ensure that it is a great employee experience by offering an employee choice program, or you've probably heard the terminology one size fits all, having a policy that impacts all employees. The alternatives today reflect those organizations that are implementing more flexible approaches in order to ensure that they deliver an exceptional employee experience, recognizing that one policy can't possibly meet the needs of the wide variety of both move types as well as employees as well as use cases. Some businesses only need employees to take rotational programs. Other businesses might need to be grooming senior leaders that have a full family, and expecting one program or policy to meet the needs of a real wide variety of employees is really impossible. So again, the evolution is around offering more choice programs. And while it's really kind of an emerging program type, if you will, and I know that you will hear from Kerwin and Schumann, I think, over the next couple of weeks. Kerwin is a real fan of saying he doesn't like the terminology core flex, but and Schumann actually administers a core flex program. So in the fall of last year, we conducted some research on those companies that we called kind of early adopters. They had opted to implement these more flexible programs and were allowing employees within guardrails to make a selection of the benefits that were most important to them. So that if you had an employee that was, say, visually impaired, they might be able to select additional unpacking and settling in services instead of having one size fits all option, take it or leave it. Maybe it's a VIP that has 4 pets instead of 4 children, and the policy historically may not have allowed the employee to take their pets with them or covered the expense associated with it. Under these programs, employees can select the benefits that make most sense for them and what is important to them, meaning that the employee experience is likely to be a lot more successful, I guess. So I think the other research that we uncovered was that the vast majority of these early adopters chose to implement an employee choice program, not purely from a cost savings perspective, but the #1 reason was to improve the employee experience. So you have a wide variety of companies, from AstraZeneca to Elanco to L'Oreal to Cisco to Micron, that are all implementing these choice programs that allow the employee to kind of curate the benefits as well. Some organizations are allowing the business to decide elements of the program or how much they want to invest. So it embraces this concept of kind of a mutual investment and differentiated investments based on how important the move is to the employee and the business. I have one client that is using a decision framework that helps the business decide if this candidate advances our DE&I objectives, or it is mapped to a critical talent requirement in the organization. They have the guidelines in place to be able to offer more extensive benefits in the way, in the form of points for that particular company. So they don't cap the relocation costs. They establish a point value to each benefit. The good news is that these programs are reportedly very, very highly regarded and viewed as excellent or very good by the vast majority of companies that are implementing them. We're talking about companies like Procter & Gamble, as I indicated, AstraZeneca, Moderna, some of the more names that you see in the news, certainly in the last couple of years around pandemic medicines, etc. The companies that administered a one-size-fits-all policy or a very strict and inflexible program would not likely rate their programs as highly regarded as these organizations, because they are managing by exception. They tend to report having exorbitant costs. They tend to have less engagement and less satisfaction as a result. So employees as well as employers are rating these employee choice programs really favorably. And I think as it relates to other talent objectives of organizations, you see the opportunity to embrace DE&I very easily with these kinds of programs, and it can really reduce the amount of exceptions that a company might be managing. And let's face it, as far as an employee experience is concerned, if I can select what's best for me, then I overcome that kind of degrading aspect of being able to ask for or beg for an exception to policy just to accommodate something that means the most to me. And simultaneously, it can have a really favorable impact on overcoming reluctance and getting employees to say yes to a move. So I thought you might want to take a look at how one of these employee choice programs takes shape. And again, the organizational team here requested that I integrate some use cases for technology and how technology is impacting mobility today. So I just did a couple of screen grabs to show you how this might work for an employee. So here you see a very Amazon-like experience where an employee has a specific number of flexible points that they can spend, and that is not attributed to a direct correlation. It's not like you have each, those 23 points are equal to an exact dollar amount, but there's some general attribution to the value of that benefit. So it helps to control costs, even if it isn't a one-for-one cost element. This particular application shows that the employee can learn more about their flexible benefits, and then very similar to any other kind of shopping experience that you might experience, whether it's Amazon or not, you would perhaps favorite those or like them and put them in your shopping cart. Ideally, these programs work in conjunction with a trusted relocation counselor, and the counselor is helping them think through what elements of a policy they might need downstream. Here you see, again, kind of a blowout of what the description of the benefit is. which again gives organizations a very scalable and nimble solution versus a static relocation policy. They can go in and change policy language on the fly if it's not working successfully, instead of adjusting it, once every 5 years, as a lot of organizations do. I have a client that is currently aligning their choice program with more sustainable policy parameters. So in this case, they identify those elements in their policy that are greener options, and they are allocating actually a negative point. So the employee, if they select a provision that is a greener provision or better for the environment, the employee will actually get an additional point that they can spend on another benefit that might be important to them. So it's aligning with their corporate initiatives for sustainability and doing right by the employee by reducing the global footprint of their mobility program. Now, a lot of these programs offer the employee the option to spend up to, as in this particular screenshot, 75 points. That's what was budgeted. At the end of the move, if they haven't spent all of the points for their specific benefits, the company is going to be donating the unused points to their forestry initiative. So it's kind of a really nice way that the organization is supporting a more sustainable global mobility program while they're improving the employee experience. I feel like I'm talking very fast. I'm taking note of time. Do we have any questions yet? Should I take a breather or do them all at the end?
I have a question.
Okay.
So through this model, would it be able to be customized according to the client's requirements? If so, how do you negotiate with the client? But if you're not able to, how would you be able to meet their needs?
So if I understand the question, the client you're referring to is the employee or the client, the employer?
To whom you're going to give this to so that they could make their employees.
Okay, so it's highly configurable. So one of the overarching ways that it's easy to configure is by establishing the number of points that an employee would have to spend, and then allocating those points for different benefits. So in that regard, it's very configurable. And the real beauty is that the employee can evaluate what's most important to them. And so companies that are administering these programs are recognizing a real reduction in the number of exceptions because the employee is the one in control. They can say, this is the option that I'm selecting because it's most important to me. It doesn't mean that it's going to cover every scenario or every cost that the employee would likely incur. But because they are in control and so making the selection themselves, it's very difficult at the end of the move, knowing that you are the one that's making these choices, to come back to your employer and say, well, you did not take care of this particular cost when you had the opportunity to choose that. So it's kind of eyes wide open going into the process, and one where, again, the most successful programs that are being administered this way are definitely administered or implemented in conjunction with the role of the relocation counselor to offer kind of that guidance to help them avoid downstream issues that might arise with their selections. They might say, oh, this is great. I want to bring all my pets with me. I'm going to choose to spend all my points to get all 4 of my pets to come and no temporary housing benefit. And then they get to the new location and don't have any temporary housing, pretty disappointed. So the counselor is there to coach them on their decision making and to make sure that they avoid any of those, those mishaps, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yes, this is like such a cool process. It's very smooth for an employee to actually be able to move freely with all this kind of support.
Okay, I just realized I can see the questions. So there is a question that says, have you noticed similar mobility changes in terms of short-term business travel, 1 week long domestic business trips compared to long-term? Definitely. There is, let me get rid of that. As we talked about earlier, the reluctance to relocate driven by partner employment, by a preference for remote work, really in some cases driven by the business that can't make long range talent assessments and career mapping. I interview, as I mentioned, a lot of executives in organizations. And I remember one series of interviews that I did with HR business leaders all over the world, and they were indicating that the business can't predict far out enough to be able to map things like what is the next assignment, what is the next, what's the repatriation plan. Business is moving so fast that they can't predict kind of their talent requirements in 3 years. You take a situation like the pending recession or increasing interest rates and what kind of an impact that's having on businesses today and the cost of their mobility program. And those elements are driving a lot more business travel and shorter term assignments. So I hope that answered that person's question. So the employee experience is not just about the employee, but your team asked me to talk about the digitalization of mobility and how, let's see, what kind of impact that has on the future of mobility. And I think one of the most important elements is how technology is improving the role of global mobility to become a more strategic partner to the business. You'll probably hear from your other speakers about this shift from tactical global mobility to more strategic. And it really was ushered in large part during the beginning of the pandemic, when employees were stranded all over the world. And now all of a sudden, global mobility was the resource that the business was coming to and saying, how do we protect these employees? How do we move them to a new country when there's a lockdown? How do we run the business? We were planning on moving employees to this new location and can't. So depending on global mobility for that kind of strategic insight. A recent E&Y report indicated that 93% of global mobility people want to automate routine tasks, that 82% want to create time in their day for more strategic initiatives, and 79% feel that technology can improve how they're using data in order to inform decisions. So again, there's a huge opportunity for improvements in how digitization can actually improve the role of global mobility in organizations. And again, I thought you might want to see an example of how a dashboard, let's see, could potentially inform some of those decisions. So what you're looking at is a dashboard that automates the view of thousands of pieces of information that historically would have taken a long time to create reports and distribute and share to the business. Now, The global mobility professional can log in, instantly assess their global mobility landscape, their activity. They can drill into specific countries, activities, a different policy type. Now we're looking at just long-term assignments. They can drill into survey responses and determine how satisfied employees are with their program. So with one dashboard, they're able to assess a huge amount of data. And not only is that improving their ability to make decisions quickly, but create that time that they want for more strategic advising of the business. Obviously, that's just one example of a dashboard. There are a lot of other technologies that are being used in mobility, and I think in the near future, we're going to see a lot more of all of these. But today we see things like virtual reality being used for virtual home tours and neighborhood tours. We're using virtual reality in order to complete household goods surveys that will automate and accelerate the speed with which we can get quotes for household goods transportation. We're using virtual reality for training and orientation purposes to ensure that employees kind of know what to expect when they land in a new country. We're seeing AI streamline and automate from the employee's perspective, the expense management function, things like document management and compliance management. We're using chatbots to provide 24/7 support to both clients as well as employees and answer their questions more quickly. We've seen a tremendous increase in the integrated HRIS, which has the promise. So we have one client that we're working with that had like a 10-step process between initiating a transfer and getting it through to the relocation management company and confirmed back to the company. And now with single sign-on, integrated APIs with their HRIS system, it is one activity in an automated workflow with automated approvals, and it has reduced it to a matter of minutes for those approvals versus what used to take weeks between all of the other systems and multiple systems in order to do it. And the real advantage there is that when you're dealing with multiple systems, you're much more likely to have inaccurate information, and that corrupts any of the reporting or data that you're making decisions on. So the fact that these integrated HRIS systems are ensuring that, for instance, we have the accurate information on the employee from their payroll information directly, we're no longer suspect to errors and omissions there and can do it a lot faster and more accurately. We see, obviously, mobile apps, everybody's on their phone, but everything from reminders to tracking to neighborhood information can all be explored via mobile apps. And through the use of single sign-on and facial recognition, we've certainly seen a dramatic increase in data security and ease of use. So that's just a couple of the ways that we're seeing digitization improve technology or improve the mobility function today. Let's see, we got a couple more questions. Let me see if we can answer there. Are there any potential downsides to the efficiency provided by using technology? Could it potentially cause mobility to become too efficient and impersonal rather than catered towards the individual needs and personality? Certainly, we advocate for a choice, care, and control. So that allows the employee to make informed choices. And we certainly advocate for the role of the relocation counselor as being really essential to that experience. And if you asked any of our clients, despite the fact they have these magical dashboards that can analyze and present data at their fingertips, there's nothing like having an account executive that understands the history of your program, understands the culture of your company, understands your budget constraints, and can help you analyze and evaluate that data, and quite frankly, be a provocateur, help you think through what should you be doing differently. There could be a risk of it becoming impersonal, but I think the vast majority of companies, and in fact, you'll see, I did a little bit of a test. I'll come back and answer this next question here. I did a little bit of a test regarding ChatGPT to study the future of mobility. So I asked ChatGPT, what's the future of mobility? And essentially the same question that one of those students asked, you know, is it going to corrupt the employee experience? And even ChatGPT said, nope, you're never going to get rid of the importance of having an empathetic and well-experienced coach help you with the relocation process. And I thought it was pretty optimistic about the fact that despite a preference for remote work and the rise of remote work, that there are always going to be both career development opportunities that require relocation and exposure to other regions, other markets, other businesses in order to groom you for leadership positions. But there are also other industries like manufacturing or mining or production that require you to physically be present in that location. So, you know, it's a knock-on impact, and at least ChatGPT agrees with me that you're never going to get rid of the people, and that relocation will always be a requirement and a worthwhile initiative. I then asked them whether or not they would be in a position to collect and share information on the destination. Again, a lot of the voice of the customer work that we do would reveal that employees want most to know, what's the destination like? What are you asking me to move to, and what's it like in that destination location? Certainly those folks that are relocating with families and kids want to know about school options. And again, ChatGPT acknowledged the important role of a relocation counselor and people that are on the ground, the importance of our destination service providers that are located all over the world that really know the Dallas market and can tell you specifically what schools have waiting lists, what local rental practices are, you know, what amenities are near the property that you're looking at. So again, it really reinforced the importance of the relocation counselor. I then said, okay, maybe a good test is how to utilize ChatGPT or any AI is to collect and present information. So I see this as a classic example of what will ultimately make our counselors far more effective in the future. They will have at their fingertips information on, for instance, average rents worldwide. Now that might be kind of scary to one of your presenters, Jordan, I think his name is Jordan Blue from Air Inc. You're meeting with him later in the series. But I think he will probably agree that the margin of error and accuracy of anything that ChatGPT can produce right now anyways is really suspect. So although it might accelerate access to information, it won't replace the very important role of the relocation counselor and relocation professionals like yourselves if you pursue this. So I hope some of these ideas stimulated some career options, some ways that you might explore global mobility. And I know that I would not have spent 4 decades in the relocation industry if it were not for the very admirable mission of unleashing the world's talent. And I think there's no more important illustration of that as an organization called Talent Beyond Boundaries. Now, when you think about the life-changing opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life, this is an example of really maybe one of the most noble ways that you could impact somebody's life. Talent Beyond Boundaries is an organization that we partner with to bring displaced workers and refugees to new employment and help them secure employment in the destination location and get settled in quickly. And when you think about life-changing opportunities, that's really quite something, that you could take a refugee that is a professional that was qualified in their home country that might be living as a refugee in another location and actually help them utilize their own training and pursue a life in a new location where they can be happy and safe and secure. So I think that global mobility has the potential to be a very rewarding career, and one that, you know, I hope that you will consider pursuing. And with that, I'll take a look at the last question and any others that come up. Anything from your end, Lakita?
Yes. As a global mobility management and technology combined major, I would like to know what are few tools that we could focus on, the open tools, like you showed the dashboard of how one could track the global mobility changes across different places for an organization. What are few tools that we could, as students, focus on and learn to end up in a better position in the job if we are searching for later on?
Well, I think that certainly business travel has a huge upside, and there are very unique business travel tracking software that allows employees to, or employers to manage the compliance risks. So that's one area where I think there's huge upside potential. And I think making sure that programs and policies are not falling victim to unconscious bias in the selection of employees has huge potential, because if mobility is a life-changing opportunity for employees, all employees should be eligible for them. And when I think back early in my career to some of the reasons that I was focused on making a difference in somebody's life, it was to really support women to be considered for these global mobility assignments, because historically they were, you know, less than 10% of all international assignees were women. And when you look at the demographics of the senior leadership of most organizations, they've all had international experiences. They ran a business in Brazil, they moved to Singapore and managed that segment of the business. You don't excel into a senior leadership role without experiencing that kind of mobility. And we as an organization or as an industry have to work extra hard to make sure that all employees feel included and are considered. So I think those are a couple areas. Did that answer your question? Okay, so the other question that we have in the group is around ethical concerns that should be taken into account as technologies for global mobility continues to develop. One of the ethical concerns is certainly AI and the unknown techniques and capabilities of AI. But I think on maybe a more pragmatic basis, the ethical concerns around things like tracking the whereabouts of an employee through our a business travel tracking capability that has long been one of those dicey situations, if you will, where employees don't want to be tracked, but a company has an ethical and duty of care to make sure that the employee is monitored and safe. And so that's one area of ethical concern around technologies, I think, going forward. But it is also another strong argument for that single sign-on and integrated HRIS systems. So it looks like we answered the other questions that we had.
We have one more question.
What are some of the new roles and job titles that have been created by AI evolution? That's a great one. I really haven't seen any new titles. You see today manager of employee experience or director of employee experience. Some of those might lend themselves to kind of being impacted by AI, but honestly, I haven't seen it impacted in the global mobility function yet. I don't know. Might be a good question for the rest of your panelists.
That was from our previous president, May.
Ah, okay. All right. So, as I indicated, 4 decades in the industry gives you a new vantage point to look at the future. And I see far more alignment with talent management and DE&I and sustainability as organizations. And I think that mobility has the opportunity to really be a life-changing potential to employees and workers in general. So I hope pouring out all my wisdom will expose a couple of great ideas for your case competition. And again, I would invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to help any struggling teams. And anything else to add? I think we're right on time.
Yeah, we're perfect on time. If any of the attendees have any questions, please put your questions in the Q&A.
One little factoid that you might find interesting in support of talent beyond boundaries, one of the struggles that client organizations have is kind of survey fatigue. So a lot of companies measure the effectiveness of their mobility programs through things like surveys. What was the quality of your service? How was your move? Did you, would you make this move again for career purposes? And they try to use this information to build better programs as well as to encourage other people to consider a relocation. But employees, well, people in general are kind of fatigued around surveys. So one of the things that we decided to do was donate to Talent Beyond Boundaries for every completed survey that is submitted, so that it's a real win-win for not only Talent Beyond Boundaries and Weichert Workforce Mobility, but the clients. So there's our timer. It's just kind of a neat factoid and another way that we're trying to make a difference in the lives of others.
Yes, now we don't have any Q&A. Thank you so much, Ellie. It was a pleasure having you. I was really honored to host this webinar with you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time and contribution to GMC. We will always appreciate it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, good luck on your case competitions. And I know the series will be phenomenal.